please, to the informal meeting of March 9th, 2020. So we pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Copies of the draft minutes are on your desk. Nice and uniformly typed.
Good job.
That's right. Complete and beautiful. This is new. Draft minutes of our meetings from February 10th and February 18th are also on your desk and posted on the city website. Communications. The first is a veto message from the mayor of the resolution of the Common Council authorizing a housing vacancy study. The second is an invitation from the Columbia County Safety Tree Committee to attend their annual kickoff for Sean's Run. I'm just trying to get the dates here. They have a tree lighting ceremony on Friday, April 3rd at 5 p.m. at the main entrance of the hospital. A couple other quick announcements. Dan Udell has just handed me a card announcing that there's a new Facebook group called Old Shiloh to commemorate the church building, which is being considered now for landmark status. So you might want to take note of that. Also, the Conservation Advisory Council is still looking for new members. If you go on the website, you'll see an announcement about that. If you're interested, particularly in trees, this year they proclaimed the Year of the Tree, and they'll be working on a tree ordinance and some other ordinances. Also on the city website is an extensive response to the coronavirus and how the county as well as the city are responding. There are a lot of links to all kinds of information. If you're concerned and worried about the county response, the state response, there's a statement from the mayor, there's a statement, I believe, from Congressman Delgado and some others. But there are a lot of links that can answer most of your questions. Once again, also on the city website, there is a link to the live stream that we have here for all city meetings. And lastly, there's a lot more information about the DRI, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. There's a draft proposal for the Fagari project that you might want to look at if you want to make comments before it's finalized, and minutes and all the other relevant documents to what's taking place for the DRI. Now, let's go to resolutions. First resolution is Commissioner Deeds. Do I have an introduction and a second?
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry. As we went through the communications and starting with the resolutions, I didn't see the vetoed resolution. Or is that just a part of with the communication?
The resolution itself?
Yes.
It's not here. We can't vote on the override until next meeting.
I know, but I would think the copy would be here. That's what I was
Oh, okay.
The veto message is in it.
That's what I was saying. It's a part of the message.
The resolution is.
Yes.
Oh, it is a text.
That's why I said it's a part of communication.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, it was Calvin and Shusha.
Not Shusha.
I mean, Dewan. The The next resolution accepts donations on behalf of the Hudson Fire Department. Another donation in the memory of James Langham Jr., who passed away recently, in the amount of $100. Can I have an introduction and a second, please? Tiffany and Rebecca. Another resolution authorizing the mayor to extend the intermunicipal agreement for the Columbia Green Shared Services Response Team. As you know, there was an extensive discussion at the last police committee meeting. Any other questions about it before we... Can I have an introduction in a second? Dewan, and it was a tough one, Jane, I think, first. The next resolution authorizes our corporate counsel, Cheryl Roberts, to offer a 90-minute training for the planning board members. That would satisfy their compulsory 4 hours of training. Any questions? Jane?
What's the cost?
Cost? No.
I mean,
There's no cost.
There's no cost. Who can,
Cheryl will conduct it.
she conducts it as a part of her
yes.
duty, so there's no additional cost. Thank you.
This is just technically to make sure that we, I mean, it's a very loose requirement to begin with. But it
Okay.
actually satisfies the 4 hours. This is just to establish that this could be one way to satisfy the 4
Got
hour
it. Thank you.
requirement.
That
Did
was
you have a question,
deal.
Tiffany?
I did, it's for you and the city council, just out of curiosity, same as last month. These resolutions are, none of them had to go before committee, or they are right for tonight? Okay, just wanted to confirm that, thank you.
An introduction and a second, please. Tiffany? Rebecca? The next is just a formality that a resolution designating a depository bank as required by the city charter. Barring any comments, can I have an introduction and a second, please? Jane and Malachi.
How long has the city been dealing with this thing?
Long time.
The next resolution authorizes the mayor to enter into a contract with James Delaney Jr. for the remainder of the year to be the city dog officer.
I have a question.
Sure.
The two letters that were written of interest, they were both by Delaney?
I'm sorry, say that again?
It says,
No, one was another possibility, but that applicant was much further away. He's right in Stockport and already does it for Stockport. And of course knows the city pretty well, so we went with him. Any other questions? Barring questions, can I have an introduction in a second? Jane? Second? The next resolution is creating an emergency access road to Mount Ray Estates. I don't know who was here at the time they presented the DPW. You're looking at me very quizzically, I mean.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see it.
And this is to start the process to get that done. So I assume you have a question.
To get it done, you mean it has been approved in the committee to spend funds, or just to begin the whole?
No, there's no expenditure involved here.
Yeah.
This is just process. Yeah, this is just to say that we, by charter, we're allowed to make streets. That's
Right.
just that part of the process.
Right.
They have to pay for all of it. The next stage is for next week. We'll need an actual sketch of the precise dimensions.
Right.
We'll need an EAF, that's a environmental
Assessment form.
assessment form,
Right.
and we'll have to do a seeker on it.
Right.
And then it's in their hands once we've just done all that. So what's
So
your
the sense of the committee is that there should be, the road should be there, or is that still,
I presume it's a good idea to have a backup road there, a good access road.
up through the cemetery?
Right, the type of improvements that need to be done to make it accessible that's an open question. It could be a lot easier than this whole resolution sounds. So, yeah, I think it's a necessity.
And it'll come up through the cemetery?
Oh, it's a very small,
It's very small.
it's a link between an existing road and the cemetery and their property. It's probably about from here to the door.
Okay,
And not very, and
so not coming up the hillside?
no.
Okay,
it's very small.
got it, thank you.
Question from the audience?
I was just going to ask exactly what we were talking about, but you've just clarified that
Oh, okay.
in the road.
That's good. Can I have an introduction in a second, please? John?
No.
The next resolution authorizes the transfer of funds to reupholster the benches in the common council. I hope this has major support from everyone sitting here tonight.
Pardon the pun.
We need more solid.
Questions from the council?
Where did this one come from?
What do you mean, where did it come from?
Yeah, I mean, does something like this go through committee, or it's just sort of like?
Well, since it does tap the general fund, it'll go to the finance committee before our meeting next week.
I mean,
It's supposed to go there first, that's what she means.
No, we can do it this way. We've done it this way before. It doesn't have to go there first. It just has to go there before we go there.
How did this, who brought this up?
I guess that's what I was wondering.
How is yours?
It's you.
Why? Because people have been asking me for this for 3 years.
Really? We don't want him to get too comfortable.
Yeah, well,
Has there been a choice made as to the material that, or?
it's pretty much the same.
Oh, it's just,
But there won't be those horrible springs anymore. It's a new, and it's saw spears. It's,
And
Wow.
who came up with this amount? We couldn't find someone to volunteer their services? Since this wasn't in the budget?
no. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm confused. What's the question?
The question was, how did we find these people to do this service for $3,200? And could we find someone that possibly volunteer services? And, because this money was not in the budget for this,
Right.
right?
Two answers to that. One is I'd actually gotten this estimate 3 years ago and went back to them because they were the least expensive. And secondly, no, I don't think anybody would do this for free. I mean, you're welcome, if you find somebody between now and next week.
He wants to do it.
We're looking for someone to do it for free.
Can I help you? I mean,
No,
question?
Just a comment. If you look for people to do it for free, you'll find them.
Thank you, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's, you
Yeah,
know,
being working in the trades,
yeah, I don't think that's the
I tend to
case.
not agree.
can
That
find
sounds
those.
the
I
best.
agree with
Lots
you.
of-
But if you look
for
for one,
free will be worse free.
It could,
There's a lot of
I get it.
volunteer services, people
Heart
that like
smile.
to sew and knit and donate.
It's really hard.
By the way, just to make a quick change before we go ahead, it's 3,500, 32 is 35. More than
Going up as
35,
we-
Even more money, look at
not that
that,
bad.
No, it's not.
more money.
An introduction and a second, please.
I mean, I'll introduce it.
Okay.
And you pay for it.
Second?
If you paying the rest of it.
So this 300 that was added.
Yeah. Oh, we don't take it later.
Oh, we don't need
That's,
Wasn't there also
Yes.
I was just asking about that.
yeah.
I'll tell you later why
We don't
we
need
don't need it. We can do it without it.
You could do what? What are you talking about?
Rebecca
I
has a
had
proposal.
I was trying
Go
to
ahead.
figure out how to get the funds to put the sign outside. And it turns out it's so inexpensive that apparently we don't need a resolution for it.
Oh, you're talking about the quad box?
Yes.
To put like an announcement board,
Yeah, the quad box.
call box?
No,
She's
it's
talking
call
about the
box.
disabled,
Oh, no.
for disabled. She's talking about a bulletin to show with the meeting.
Oh,
Right,
I got you,
Right,
okay.
something just to be able to post what are
Oh.
we.
There's enough money in the council budget, we could just do it that way.
Okay.
I had no idea what the amount you were gonna propose was, and when I saw it, I realized we don't need a resolution.
It's $129.
Oh, God.
By the way, we still have on our desks, and we'll be voting at the next meeting on the amendment of the lodging tax. And that's all that's official for tonight.
We
Tiffany?
didn't have a motion, an introduction or a second for the resolution that was vetoed.
No, the way it goes is we only can overturn the veto at the next meeting, at the first official meeting, but not at this meeting.
Next week,
Yeah.
without an introduction. Okay, so I would like to talk about it, and I also have my guest here for tonight, our housing officer, Rebecca Garrard, excuse me. This resolution, it was worked on and supported by the council because we all understand that a housing crisis is taking place not only in New York State but throughout this entire country. You know, it's a lot of questions around supporting landlords, supporting renters, and from where I stand and from where the council support stands, we support our constituents who are renters and want to ensure that they would have a place, a secure place to live without the fears of losing their apartments for a building of sale, raising of rents, et cetera, et cetera. With this housing study, we would know how many units that were built before 1974, 6 or more units, that would qualify. But we would never know unless we do this study. We don't know if Hudson was to qualify, if Hudson was not to qualify. I would like to give my constituents a firm answer of yes, we do qualify, or no, we do not qualify. If we was to qualify, and let's say, for example, we fall under it with just 2 buildings that would fall under that Emergency Tenant Protection Act. Those would be units in those 2 buildings that secure for renters forever. Whether we're their elected officials or not, when they decide to remain in the city of Hudson, they can do that with security. We don't know, and we can't say that we do because we don't know how many buildings would fall under this act. Nowhere in our resolution that we passed stated that it would cost $15,000 because we don't know how much it would cost. For all we know, we can get volunteers to do it for free. As the gentleman stated, if you look for them, you'll find them. All you got to do is look. There's volunteers everywhere, everywhere. And I found some throughout this work that we do as council members. There's volunteers everywhere. And I was very proud of this council for authorizing the mayor to do this vacancy study. For all we know, the vacancy study, the mayor could have partnered with the college, with the community college, could partner with the university, could partner with other cities, for all we know. It could have been free. Could have cost $2,000. For a 2 square mile city, it could have been that much. Who knows? But we would never know unless we do it. And let's say it was $15,000. He would still have to come before the council for that approval. But at least we know, and we can confirm with our constituents, that the vacancy study was done. We can let our people know that we hear and we see and we know the housing crisis is real. and this is what we can do to help, and we've done it. Whether it was successful outcome and the results or not, but we did what we were voted in to do. And that's where I stand. And I would like to direct the floor to my guest, please.
Well, before Rebecca speaks, other council members want to talk first?
I mean, I think, as you know, Tiffany, I supported this initial push, but I mean, we have to address the data that the mayor sent in his veto message.
I'm sorry, I wanted Rebecca to speak because this information that the mayor sent was in an email that was sent from Linda Mussman, from a volunteer who used to help me out in the last term on the Housing and Transportation Committee. This person who sent this information years ago had came up with this data from his experience working years ago in housing. Nothing in this is official. That came before us that says, dot line, $15,000 to do a vacancy study in the city of Hudson.
But I think that's beside the point as to what this list of properties here is speaking to, which sort of does undercut at least the initial push for us to do this study, which I supported. So I think we have to address what this data means and if it could be used toward whatever this study could be, because it seems clear that it does put into question how we could, how we're going to be able to interact with the new state law, because it seems like we might not have enough properties to qualify.
And if we don't,
Rebecca?
I would like to hear more about what could constitute a vacancy study. Like, is this data, which is, I remember when this was collected, it was part of the push for the Strategic Housing Action Plan, and it was done, by one person, and so I just am curious to hear more about, what actually goes into a vacancy.
You mean from Rebecca? We will, but council gets to speak first.
and also, if you
Okay,
look
so I'm
at
just
that
saying
data that you're referring to, in the top left corner, it's by Galvin Inventory. So, I don't know whose data is this, but that's what it says on the top left corner, Galvin Inventory. What we did as a council passing that vacancy study is just allowing the mayor to do the study. It's not saying you have to spend this amount of money. It's just saying do the study. Let's find out if we fall under it or not.
Well,
The Strategic Housing Action Plan, which the council adopted in our first term, and it appears used some of this data, set the vacancy rate at 7% for the city, which is above the threshold you need to fall under in order to declare the emergency. So to spend money to repeat output that we got from the Strategic Housing Action Plan, which in itself must have cost some amount of money.
Well, please, let's not confuse it and constantly say spending money, because the resolution did not indicate any amount of money to be spent. So let's make that clear and not to be confused. Nothing in the resolution states money being spent. The resolution states for a vacancy study to be done. Whatever money has to be spent, as former treasurer, it has to come before the council for approval.
Any other
And the notion of volunteers, I think we're lucky we have as many as we do, and with the skills that they have. But if we're going to go down a path with rent control and all other kinds of additional layers of government, I think it ought to be based on data that we pay for, in the sense that we would hire professionals to do it.
But first you stated you didn't want to pay the professionals, so now we're looking for someone with the skills, as you stated, to volunteer.
Pay which professionals? Which ones are you
To
saying?
do the study, as you stated.
I don't think it's necessary, because we have a recent output, the Strategic Housing Action Plan, that quantified what we're asking to spend more money to quantify again.
And that's what it
Asking
seems
to
that this
spend
data is
One
from.
time, Rebecca?
Yeah.
Well, I just think it's not very helpful for us to speculate about about whether we should have a vacancy study performed by a volunteer or a paid person without really understanding more about what actually constitutes a vacancy study. I don't think that what was done for the Strategic Housing Action Plan was any level of, I mean, there definitely wasn't like a door-to-door investigation of properties or anything like that. So to me, it seems like, again, we just need more information, or I feel like I need more information in terms of understanding how this data might relate to.
Maybe following on with what you're saying, so to your point, maybe what was done by the Strategic Housing Task Force could have been half, or to start if there's an actual inventory of property, if we know that there's X amount of buildings that have 6 or more apartments, which seems that there's some listed here, and that date, that must be in
These are
the
all Galvin
the
properties.
vacancy. Well, that doesn't mean anything.
These are all Galvin
Yeah, but
properties.
that's, hold on, that's just a search
Still
field.
using.
It's prepared by the Strategic Housing Task Force. This is a search field, it doesn't mean that this came up from Galvin.
I know, it's like that.
It's just ridiculous. Anyway, so the point,
Okay, please, it's a little over here.
Dominic, didn't you
Council
get...
speaks first.
let me finish my
Oh,
point
I'm
really quickly.
sorry.
So I think, to Rebecca's point, that maybe half of the work was done, but we don't know the vacancy part of it. But if we already have an inventory of property, then we could take
Right.
that and then move from there to
Right,
forward.
and I mean, and in terms of the question also of volunteer, like, I heard, and this is not research exactly, but that it is, and I think I've said this in this room before, but that urban planning departments, like graduate students, can be put to good use in this, and it's not, so it's somewhere between like just a person who volunteers to do it and a professional. So.
Point taken. Dominic, didn't you get some data from the Office of Real Property?
Yeah, I can share that, but the properties that, there wasn't many that fulfilled that.
Right.
And that are vacant.
Right.
You know, and again, the landlord's got to sign off on that survey.
Right.
So there's a lot of layers to having this done. And I know Kingston, you know, they spent their money and they came back and they weren't eligible with their vacancy study. So, you know, we're definitely a smaller place, you know, than Kingston. But I don't, you know, I can share that property, but it wasn't a lot of property in the city
Right.
that fell under that criteria.
Okay, since we've heard from the council, before we go to Rebecca, I'll take this one question.
I just want to answer your question as to why it's very amusing that Galvin is the one who did that study.
Yeah, I didn't do this.
Okay, sorry. I misunderstood. Okay, I misunderstand. Okay. That's, well,
All that means is that this is all Galvin properties. This is, all it means that it says Galvin inventory at the top is just that these
Right,
things listed on
exactly.
this page.
That was a
are all
search
Galvin
field to
properties.
produce this, has nothing to do with it.
that's fine.
Which also leaves it open to a question like, okay, so what are the other properties that are not Galvin-owned properties? So,
No, that's great. Just, Rebecca, Dylan Meyer, First Ward, I think, Rebecca and Jane. But, so why I found it laughable was I was under the impression that Galvin had done the study. I was wrong. That's fine. Okay. But Galvin and Galvin subsidiaries own 92 properties in the city of Hudson. 92. Do you know how many the city of Hudson owns? 87.
I think.
What? Look it up. On the.
That's not correct.
Look it up. On the NICE SDG website,
The city owns what?
87 properties.
I don't think so.
Okay, again, if you would please let me finish my statement.
Okay.
I looked this up. Galvin has 5 different subsidiaries under which he owns 92 properties in the city of Hudson. The city of Hudson, according to the SDG database, which is searchable by the public, which is how I got this information. If you search City of Hudson owns 87 properties. Okay, and just Just putting it out there.
I don't think you understand what those properties often are.
You know, I looked at them and many of them are public lands.
Right.
Right. So I'm just saying,
I'm not sure what the point is.
the
They're
point,
on properties, what's...
but think of the little dichotomy there. There are 87 publicly owned properties and there are 92 properties, more of which are vacant houses owned by essentially one person. And so if you don't see what's wrong with that, then we have to talk further.
I think your information's incorrect, so...
Well,
Please look it up. It's
I've looked it up
publicly
extensively.
regardless of that, I mean, there's been a years-long conversation in this community about the role of Galvin Industries, the majority, and it's problematic. At the same time, when we're dealing with housing, communities have to partner with private developers to build housing. However it happened or not, we've ended up with Galvin being the largest operator in that field here. There's no one else doing it, and we have to find new partners if that's an issue. So to your point about that, the numbers that you're bringing up, also the vacant properties that the city has, and this is something that interests me greatly, a lot of them are, the way that we're zoned right now, undevelopable unless we change the zoning. So to say we own 86 properties is correct, but if they can't be developed or built right now, then it's meaningless. It does nothing for us.
Some of them are little slivers of land, and there's all kinds of... Let me finish. You're putting out information that's fundamentally flawed.
It's not.
It is, because first of all of Galvin's properties are not vacant.
I didn't say they were. I never said they were.
Secondly, well, you did suggest that many of them
I did
were.
not.
Secondly, this idea that the city owns 87 properties, I mean, we're talking about parks, we're talking about all kinds of properties that, I guess I don't understand your major
You
point.
missed that point. I'm not trying to directly compare properties that the city owns to Galvin properties that I'm not saying are vacant. Many Galvin properties are not vacant at all, which is great. They have wonderful people living in them, and I don't want that to change at all. What I'm saying is if you just look at the number of publicly owned properties in the city of Hudson and compare that to the number of properties owned by effectively one person, that ratio is very out of whack. That's all I'm saying.
But it is what it is.
It does not have to be.
Well, I don't know the point you're trying to make to us, and therefore we should... Sorry, just go on and on.
I know.
Yes, my question is, we were talking about empty apartments. Does that include the empty buildings that are all over the city, which are not on the market?
I missed the question.
You were asking about empty apartments and
We're speaking of empty apartments. Are the buildings which are sitting empty all around the city included as being empty and they could be rented? Or is it they're just off the market and they don't count?
Count for what? I'm not
Are you talking about the vacancy studies?
Yes, for a vacancy
Some of them are off the market, some of them are attached to different agencies where they're looking for developers.
Yeah, but are they counted in this? Because they are empty.
Has to be 6 units.
They would be, yes. If they fit if
We
they
had a
qualify
vacancy
as
study,
having
yes.
more than 6 units and built before 1974, yes, they would.
Whether they're on the market.
If they're being held off the market, they would not qualify.
If they're what?
If they're being held off the market, they would not qualify.
So that's a very damaging thing for us because there are a lot of buildings in.
I'm going to let you talk now, Rebecca, since this is
Thank you.
running far afield.
So for those that don't know, I'm Rebecca Garrard, Campaigns Manager for Housing Justice with Citizen Action. I think I just want to start by thanking everybody, no matter where you lie on this issue, for sticking with it and being willing to dialogue on it and engaging in it. I know this has been somewhat of an arduous process with a lot of strong feelings on both sides that have kind of, I feel like, derailed. And so I really want to try to ground us back into just focusing on the issue of ETPA and really walking us through the process and trying not to jump to an end result. but really just taking us through the steps, right? And what it means. So the council issued a resolution calling on the mayor to issue an RFP. Completely respect the mayor and the positions he has to take. What the RFP does is seek information as a first step in the process. So, you know, we did research about a year ago, 2 years ago, when we were first starting the push for the expansion of ETPA, rent stabilization in upstate cities. And I know at a meeting I was at recently, I gave the number of approximately 300 units, which is what we came up with when we collected the data on probably 30 cities, right, across upstate. It could be 100, it could be 500. The vacancy rate study is what gives us that information, right? I think it's important to know in terms of the data that's being referenced this evening, that the vacancy rate of 5% or less only applies to the impacted units. So the overall vacancy rate of the city does not matter. The only thing that matters is the vacancy rate of the units in buildings built before 1974 that have 6 or more units. So that is the only pertinent thing. And so while that data was really important for its purpose at the time, it's a different purpose, right? That study was commissioned for a different reason and was very necessary and valid, right? But it's like apples and oranges to what we're looking for. They're just two different things. They're two different things. And we just won't know the cost until the RFP is issued.
So if it's just, and it's easier for now, sorry, if it's buildings before 1970, built before 1974 that are 6 or more units that would fall into this law, we're a very geographically small area, and we don't have a lot of apartment buildings typically. We have a lot of converted homes, and again, up to full disclosure, I'm a big supporter of expansion and housing rights. I just don't see how hard it will be. I did support the resolution at first, but I think very quickly we could go to the assessor's office and find out how many buildings in this very small community are from 1974 or prior with those 6 or more units. So, and anecdotally, I don't think it's many, so I don't know.
You could, I agree with you. And so I guess my position has always been, right, so you wouldn't be able to determine the vacancy rate, but you could determine the number of units.
Yes.
And so my position has always been and will continue to be, I'm just going to be honest, whether it was 50 or 100 or 300, there is a one-time investment by the city to protect those units and provide rent stabilization to those units in perpetuity. One-time investment on conducting the if I could just finish,
yeah, sure.
On conducting the vacancy rate study, of which we don't know the cost yet, right? Which we will only know when we issue the RFP, to provide those people with protections against rent increases and the strongest eviction protections in the state from a one-time investment on conducting a vacancy rate study.
Well,
If I could just, I swear. That is literally the decision you're being asked to make.
Okay, I'm a renter, so I'm protected by eviction under the current law that was just passed in June, correct?
There's no fault evictions are still legal in the state.
Right, so.
There is no eviction protections.
Right, but if.
Under the law that was just passed,
Rent
unless.
stabilization, rent control would protect those units.
Correct.
Right, so if we get down to, if it's under 60 units in Hudson, I'm just picking a number off the top of my head, or 30 even, because who knows how many of these buildings are. Who subsidizes that cost then? If we find out, if we adopt those laws, then it's on the landlords, correct, for the rent stabilization cost. What's the city's role in that, or what would our role be?
So there's no subsidizing of the cost that's required. So in New York City, I'll just go on to some stats that I've given before and that I completely understand your question, and I appreciate you asking it. Rent stabilization has existed in New York City since 1974, and since that time, 95% of property owners have existed and function at a profit. So it is the most well-vetted system you could find that provides affordability and eviction protections while allowing for profitability for property owners. So there's no subsidy on the part of the city needed. What it does is it limits, right, in a reasonable manner, the sort of gouging, right, of profitability, which we know happens in our communities. And look, nobody knows better than you all, right? I'm a statewide campaigns manager for housing, right? But I know that I deal with community members in Hudson who literally cannot find affordable housing.
Well, I guess
or who face 50% rent hikes.
Well, I guess
I had a call from a gentleman on Warren Street whose rent was literally going up 50% from $1,000 to $1,500.
But the question of scale is something that's different between New York City and Hudson, and I would say that from my experience here as a renter, I think the problem is not so much the lower scale of affordability, because we have a lot of that through Section 8 and through our housing authority. It's more for when you're just leaving that tier, you know, if you're making $20 an hour and you're trying to pay rent based on that, I think that's where the squeeze is for apartments. So I'm not sure, again, I'm skeptical of this only because of our size, not because I don't support generally the wider push of the law.
Yeah, and I respect that. You know, this is kind of that perfect place for that squeeze, because if it's Section 8 subsidized housing or public housing, it would be disqualified, right? So to me, this is the perfect solution for that squeeze you speak of, because it would apply to units outside of those parameters, right? Those already have embedded.
But then what happens if we lock in those, well, let's pick a number. If it's 6 buildings that have 6 or more units back from this period of time, and suddenly we lock that in as rent stabilized, then no one's going to come in and build larger units to face that problem. I mean, we're still stuck with the problem of affordability on that. We just locked in 60 or 30 or 40 units at something, which is great for the people who would have them, but
I just want to understand your question. You're saying no one would come in and build why?
If we lack the stock, right now to have a wide rent stabilization program, and we only have a very few buildings that suddenly, like you said, it's great if you could lock in 30 units at a rent stabilized protection. It still might not fit the demand that we might have beyond that for that work.
Yeah, I guess I just don't see.
I know, but
So let's not do nothing at all?
no, I'm not saying that. I'm just wondering if this is actually the right solution for us for our housing problem that we have here. This might be a wider, a broader problem, a broader solution for other communities, but might not affect us.
I don't see them as mutually exclusive, right? So I see it working in partnership with other solutions. So you're right, it's not going to solve the housing crisis in Hudson or in any municipality, to be quite honest with you. But I see it, but if I could just, but I see it really working in partnership with other amazing things that I anticipate this council doing, because I know how deeply they care about housing. But this is something that, again, is a one-time cost that we don't know what that cost is yet, and you absolutely can work with urban planning departments of colleges. And also the cost is related to the number of impacted units. So I would anticipate that this cost would be relatively low in comparison to other cities because of that low number. So again, the choice you're making really is it worth protecting those units? That's a choice ultimately, you know, that you as the elected officials of this city are going to have to make, but it is my assertion that if it were only 60 people, that number you've thrown out, that you would be protecting, then it's worth doing. It's a one-time cost. And again, not to get ahead of ourselves, issuing the RFP only finds out what that cost is. It doesn't commit you to any further step of the process, right? And I think this is kind of snowballed, and I would encourage everyone to take a breath, right? and let each step of the process play itself out. Just because Kingston was mentioned, I do want to bring that up because I'm coordinating all of the E2P campaigns across the state. It is not done in Kingston, so if you have not seen the latest article in the Daily Freeman, the council and the mayor have found that the agency was unable to provide verified results. So that is still an ongoing situation in Kingston, and they're in the process of verifying those results. So that's not entirely true. I don't remember who said it, but I know somebody said it about Kingston.
Can you tell us a little bit about the way that Kingston did this? Like,
yes.
What agency did they use? How many units did they have in Kingston that applied, that were, you know, relevant to the study?
Yeah. Absolutely. I was at the caucus meeting where the council questioned the agency around the results. So they had about 1,400 units that were considered eligible. They had a lot of property owners who were non-participatory, so that was problem number one. Some sort of in delaying their responses, and some, it was really interesting to hear at that caucus meeting, who the agency reported actually said to the agency, you can keep asking us, but we're not going to ever participate in your study, which is not surprising, but the boldness of that, I think, was surprising, right? What was really informative, and I think shapes how other municipalities, like Albany has issued an RFP, Rochester has issued an RFP, what I think shapes how other municipalities should move through this process is that there was no requirement embedded in the contract with the agency around door knocking. And so it was revealed through the questioning of the agency that there was very few units that were actually door knocked. And so almost the entirety of the results were self-reported results by the property owners. And they really just said at that public meeting that they could not report the results as verified. So my advice to other municipalities has been that really informs, right, how other municipalities can move should they choose to contract with an agency or urban planning department to ensure that there is a requirement around verification of the data they're getting.
So if you're saying they have around 1,400 units in Hudson, and their cost was something like $32,000. So if Hudson had a 1/10 of those units that were relevant, it could conceivably cost a 1/10 of $30,000, which would be the same that we're just approving to reupholster the seats of the common council.
And I would rather have someone secure in their apartment than a seat in City Hall.
Yeah.
Jane.
Yes, thank you. Matt, I have a question of the guest. Oh, goodness. If you had 100 apartments in Hudson that would qualify for this thing, meeting the criteria of the date and the size and et cetera, and 20 of those people owning 20 of those apartments decline to participate, does that make the field then 80? Does that make the pool 80?
No.
And you just eliminate those 20? I mean, how does that,
So
share how that works?
So yes, I can thank you for asking that again. So there's two ways you could do that. One is there's actual case law that says if you have a non-participatory property owner in a vacancy rate study that you can count that vacancy rate as 0 and do nothing else, right? Which discourages that sort of lack of participation. But the other thing you can do is actually just door knock the property, right? To determine the vacancy rate through that means, right? To get an actual vacancy rate. And so that would be the discretion of, I would say, the municipality, whether they want to take the most aggressive approach to get the lower vacancy rate, which would be to say we're citing the case law that exists that says if a property owner is not participatory, we can count the vacancy rate as 0, or whether they want to go the other route and insist on door knocking. Those are two
And
ways.
that would establish over the objection of a non-participatory
And both are
homeowner.
legally valid.
Okay, thank you, that
Yeah,
clarifies
thank
it.
you for asking.
Did you want to speak, Mayor?
Sure. As someone who also cares about housing, and I respect everyone on the council, and Rebecca, I respect your experience in this field. I just think it's a little reckless to, like, say if there's 3 units that qualify, it's a little reckless to promote this as rent control when it's not equitable for everyone. And then we don't know who lives in those units and if they really need rent control. So it's not even affecting the population that we need to affect. And with our fund balance the way it is, we have to be very careful on certain decisions. So whatever you guys choose, like, it's totally up to you, and I'll back you 100%. So if you want to study, then we'll do a study. That's totally up to you guys. But I just think we need to think this through, because what are we telling the public when the person across the street from you doesn't have rent control and needs housing? So we have to be very careful with this, because the general public thinks it's going to be rent control for everyone, not 2 buildings.
Explain it to them.
But you haven't.
I think I didn't.
And that was the question I wanted to just step back in my own head. Have we decided that we're going to do rent control? I think that sounds like the path that we're going down. I don't remember if we ever made a decision that said that. So if it is something that is less than that, I think we ought to define what it is that we're thinking about. We're gonna incent, I think,
Right.
some
I
of the
understand what
wrong
you're saying, but I think
behavior.
that's putting, as the expression goes, the cart before the horse. I mean, this would allow that to happen, but it doesn't mean it has to happen.
But that's been what we've said all the way along in this process. When it first came up, it was, well, listen, this is just to tell Albany to pass it, we'll have a decision, and we're coming down the garden
I
path.
think it's unfair, because what we were saying when this first came up and we put forth the resolution was that, first of all, we wanted to make our own decision about these issues.
Right.
That was a big part of it.
Right.
Secondly, there were a lot of issues that had nothing to do with rent control, and those all obtained now. They're all in effect. So rent control was part of it, but it was not essential. And we're just on that path. There's no predetermined ending here.
It feels
Okay.
And I would like to also state once again, this is the first process. We don't know unless we try. We don't know unless we do it. We don't even know the cost unless we send it out. This is the first process of it. So in my position, with the constituents that I represent, I don't care if it's only 6 units that we only find that in the entire city that can be for rent stabilization. That means 6 families are secure, whether we are their elected officials or not. That's my position. We have Galvin doing things, good things, some not so good things. People agree, people disagree. But let's really talk about it. You have an article that came out in the newspaper about affordability apartments. But we all know if Galvin wants to sell that property and say, I'm not doing this project, he can do that. There's no real commitment. Where's the real collaboration? Excuse me, I'm at the floor. There's no real collaboration. There's no real security for our people. If we want to have security, real security for our people with Galvin and renting, why isn't it a pilot program such as the Hudson Terraces to secure 30 years for all those units in the Hudson Terraces? Those people can say, for 30 years, I know I can live here with no issues. Yes, when the 30 years is up and they have that opportunity to say, no, we're not going to continue the pilot, or we'll continue the pilot, as we did when that issue came up before. And we had tons of people who were nervous about not having a place to live if the property owners of Hudson Terraces decided not to continue with their pilot program. So that's what we're dealing with. Rent stabilization stabilization, no, it's not going to take over the whole city. We know that. It's buildings before 1974 of 6 or more units. But what we're telling the people is we want to know, we want to find out how many units are there that we can protect those few families. We don't know. Yes, the article is beautiful. That design is great. It's hopeful. It sends a beautiful message. But the reality is, if he wants to flip the coin, he can. Where's the middle ground that we can ensure with our people, the constituents in this city, that they have affordable housing? Where? Because the article says it, because Galvin says it? Where? There's no pilot. There's nothing that guarantees that.
But that's gonna, I mean, we shouldn't conflate the developers we're working with and whatever this resolution is.
We are, and I am, because the article came out.
I know, but
And he made
whatever this
comments.
resolution is and whoever we partner with to develop affordable housing are two different things. And so the scope of what Rebecca's presenting here is different from, I think.
Well, my comment was not only just for the audience, but it was also addressing the mayor's comment, John.
Okay.
Mayor,
But
oh, sorry, John.
No, I mean, I'm just really curious about what the, you know, what aside from how we develop affordable housing, yeah, I don't know, what this
Rebecca.
Is it as simple as going to the assessor's office or the tax, whatever the office, and just figuring out how many properties, like is there a relatively simple way? I don't mean the vacancy study itself, but I mean just identifying what are we talking about. 2 years ago, I would probably say yes, but now from everything that I've been dealing with, and as busy as the assessor is, she works part-time and is only in her office maybe, I think, 2 days out of the...
We already have the information from your strategic
and
housing
she's not
task
going to
force.
be here long.
We would have the property data already, we just don't know the vacancy.
She's leaving in 6 months.
Well, but that didn't assess that wasn't looking for this specific slice of kinds of properties.
Well, we should have that, if you did a survey of rental properties or not, whatever worked in, I was on a task force, I don't know, then they should have some, they should have part of the...
It's a little misleading. This inventory that was done was not technically part of the task force. It was done as a sort of accessory to the process. Like it wasn't, the information was never introduced to the task force as like, here you go.
Well, then how did you guys inform your findings based on?
Well, so you'd have to ask Joe.
I thought it was self-reported by as many of the building owners. I wasn't on the committees, but I went to several of the meetings, and I thought it was self-reported data, and that they knew it wasn't all of it, but it was what it was, and it was...
So then maybe we do go to the assessor and obtain some of this information.
Yeah, Dominic already got that.
Do that, you know.
Did Dominic
know it
anyway?
So.
You don't know.
Speak.
Right.
Audience members?
I don't know the human.
Yes.
No.
Just as something to keep in mind as we're looking for all of this data, the 2020 census is happening.
Okay.
So, if we have census workers for the federal government going out and knocking on doors, give them 2 extra questions. Okay, all right, that's fine, that's fine. But using it as a model, you keep shaking your head as if these things are impossible, Tom. They are exactly, they are not. So don't think and act like they are.
I appreciate your engagement and that you're here, but, you know, people have thought of these things before.
That's great. Why aren't they happening?
Because there are many obstacles to what you're proposing.
So let's
Like the law, for one, in this
Let's
case.
harness some of the. Let's harness the power of the people that live in Hudson. All right,
God
like
bless you from that.
it's gonna happen.
Let me know when you're-
I will. I absolutely will.
We will support you. Rebecca.
I just, because of the nature of the veto and needing to vote on this next week, if it's going to be overridden, right? I'm fully supportive of the idea of checking with the assessor's office, but I just do want to remind the council that an issuing of an RFP is still not creating an expenditure, right? And especially a resolution authorizing the mayor to issue an RFP is like even one step removed from that.
Okay, thank you. I think that. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something because there's a lot of bad information being given out in this meeting and it's like very unprofessional. But like when we do a project or a partnership, it's not just like, you know, you flip a coin and someone can just like change their mind. Like there's serious contracts that go into this and planning and thought. So I just want to throw that out there. And like I want to remind the council like to do your research before you guys speak out to the public because, you know, some things can be damaging when you say the wrong stuff.
Ron, you have something original to say.
I don't know, you'll have to judge. Without prejudice to the issue of rent stabilization, I think that before, you know, what needs to happen is that whatever information is available immediately, to the extent that it's available, should be used to get a better idea of how many units you're talking about and get some kind of ballpark idea. And if this is through the assessor's office, however else it can be done, because the discussion is really hampered by lack of more accurate information. You know, is it 6, is it 60?
I made a note to talk to her as soon as possible.
The estimate from our research, I'll just remind everybody, was 300 from.
But that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it could not.
300 estimate what? I didn't hear what you said.
The estimate from her research was 300.
It was not mine, it was the coalition's, and it is somewhat dated, but.
One last comment.
One last comment. So you guys have some sort of data file about all of the assessment and inventory data for the city of Hudson.
Well,
Not exactly.
So, but okay, but
there's
either.
certain information there.
So I have put in a FOIL request with the county real property tax services for exactly all of that information. And I'm going to get it on a flash drive tomorrow.
For what information exactly?
For all of the assessment and inventory data for the city of Hudson for all years that it is available.
For all of that available?
Yes.
So you'll work with the mayor to do the vacancy study for free?
Sure thing.
We don't need a resolution for that.
Absolutely.
I will. We vote next week.
I get that data tomorrow. I am more than happy to work with anybody who wants to work with me, or I will diligently work by myself and do this stuff.
Thank you.
And thank you, and I'm here whenever we can get together and work, and also join us at our Housing and Transportation Committee. It'll take place next month. We also have other meetings, and I can talk to you after this one, so you can join us there as well.
And Dominic, could I just ask Dominic to send the data to all of us? Because he asked the county assessor to screen for prior to 1974, above X number of units. So there is a beginning place.
Anything else?
I just
Any
want
other
to say,
topic? Yes.
thank goodness we have a place like the Hudson Terraces with a pilot program to ensure security for our constituents and our residents. Ooh. Less than 6,000.
Anything else for the public?
Motion to adjourn, please.
Second. Ron, all in favor?
Aye. It's over.
Where did you on there?
It's over, honey.
Motion to adjourn. He said you didn't give enough time for the public. I'm sorry.
Yes, we did.
Go ahead, what would you like to say?
So thank you for giving me time. I just like very little time. So I represent the Hudson Islamic Center, 35 North 3rd Street. So I'm a New York State employee. My name is Syed. I'm coming here to a special comment or a discussion which I would like to just bring it up open to everybody. we work with, I work with the Solidarity Coalition, a group of interfaith people from all around the Capital District, and it's a coalition against hate speech, against the governor's initiative of no hate in New York State. I'm a South Asian. I'm from India, basically. We just had a discussion with the mayor of Hudson, Mr. Kamal Johnson, and this is about a new law that is passed in India. I know this is a little bit off the scope of the Hudson City Council, but this is a global village. Anything affects anywhere else is going to be effective in any part of the world, just like coronavirus. Now, India recently passed a Citizenship Act in which the government of India said every citizen from any country can come to India as an immigrant and apply for citizenship, except the person as declared as a Muslim. But that's just a beginning of it. One thing that it's very, very alarming is this government in India is basically backed by fascist regime, and they are inspired by Nazi Germany. This is their ideologue, who has written a book called Bunch of Thoughts. The government of India, ruling party is called BJP and RSS. They have written a book. The founder of this party says this party is inspired by what the Nazi Germany did to purify the race. And they are on the same path, and they have started different programs to eliminate minorities. They just recently, there was a church, there was a Jesus statue that desecrated. They've killed hundreds of Muslims just recently while Mr. Trump, President Trump, while he was visiting the city of Delhi. In the same city, there was a massacre happened and more than 50 people died officially. But there are reports that there are more than 150 people died. This regime is embarked on a program of same what Nazi Germany did to eliminate the minorities of that country in 1940s, that is the Jewish Holocaust. And we are experiencing the same thing. Our relatives, our friends in India, they're very scared to that. They're not about to talk, they're not about to protest. When they went out to protest, they were killed, they were put in jail. The media is compromised, the judiciary is compromised, everything is under attack. What we did was, as we reached out to a lot of local senators here. We have spoken with Senator Paul Tonko, and we have also spoken to Congressman Antonio Delgado, and there is a petition that is signed by more than 1,000 people in the area, in the Capital District, also in Hudson, to put up a resolution. And that is being right now worked in the Congress. There is resolution and people are working on it. But at the same time, the local city councils are passing the resolution. The city of Seattle, Washington, they passed the resolution. The city of Albany, they passed the resolution.
Can I stop you there for a second?
Sure.
If you have a template for this resolution, please send it to me.
Okay.
And I will put it through the process.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'll give my card right after I should give you the address. You're welcome. Yes.
One more. Okay. So this was mentioned earlier briefly at the start of the meeting that there's a coronavirus outbreak in the United States. That is a fact. Okay? It's happening. There are in fact cases right here. Cases at Albany Med. Okay? And so we need, it's great, and I'm very thankful that you have the information up on the city website. But we need to have a public meeting in a venue much larger than this.
So that more people can get it?
It's so that, look, it's inevitable. Look, I don't want to sound alarmist at all here, but most people, until we develop a vaccine, will get this virus. Okay? So what I propose is a public meeting in a venue about the size of, say, the middle school, to inform the public on what it is, how it spreads, where it originated, and what you can do to prevent yourself from getting it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.